I know what you're thinking. Did we really need yet another Batman spin-off? Well, you're getting one. The Penguin lands this week. I gotta say, it feels different. More like a sequel to The Sopranos than anything else. The group chat is here. Let's go. I'm Ali Hassan, sitting in for Elamin Abdul Mahmoud. This is Commotion. And if you know the Batman universe, you might have considered the Penguin thus far as more of a B-list villain. But the Gotham City gangster is now the main character in one of this year's most anticipated films.
Penguin, you waltzing in here like you mean something. We're in the middle of a gang war.
Carmine Falcone's dead. If we don't protect what's ours, we just look weak. The streets are talking again. They know there's only one man big enough to run this city. The new Kingpin of Gotham.
I think I called it a film. It's a series. It feels like a film. That is Colin Farrell, who you heard completely unrecognizable as the Penguin. If you said, "Oh, I knew it was him," you're lying. You're telling a fib for sure. That show premieres tomorrow on Crave, and then it moves to the Prestige slot on Sunday nights. Roxana, Hadidi, and Simponpillai have seen it before the rest of us, and they are here to tell us whether it lives up to the hype. Hello to both of you.
Hello.
All right, Rad, let me start with you. You know, watching that trailer, you really have no idea that it's about the villain from the Batman. It seems more like a spinoff, as I said, from The Sopranos. For anyone who is new to this universe, give me a brief breakdown here. What is the Penguin about?
I mean, so this is almost like a villain origin story for the Penguin, this version of Penguin, the Colin Farrell version of Penguin, who we met briefly in the last movie, The Batman, that starred Robert Pattinson as this kind of emo goth Batman. And so this time, now that the mob boss Carmine Falcone was taken out, this Penguin seizes his opportunity to go from kind of small time hustler to kind of to take over the rackets in Gotham. And so it's mostly about how he's gaming his competitors, but he's got to deal with Carmine Falcone's daughter, Sophia Falcone, who's fresh from Arkham Asylum and is basically someone that could either be friend or foe to him.
Okay. And yeah, so as you know, we should say this, Roxana, Batman doesn't show up at all in this series. That might surprise some, but to anybody who's gotten into the Joker world, you know that's not so strange at all. So how does that approach work for you, telling this story as a gangster drama, the way Rad just described it?
It worked really well for me, if only because I am a Godfather person. I'm a Martin Scorsese person. I think it's really fun to remove Batman from a story and to make it more grounded, a little bit more realistic, a little bit more gangster pastiche. I mean, the reality of Batman is any story with Batman is going to be overwhelmed by him. He is such an outsized figure that I think it opens up the world of storytelling possibility actually to remove him, right? So he is not the foe who is sort of dictating everything Penguin does. This version of the story is a lot more like the BBC series Gangs of London, where it's infighting within the gangs of Gotham, who's going to end up on top. And I really liked that. I thought that it kept the stakes pretty clear and the storytelling very quick moving, honestly. I didn't have to fear that Batman would come and ruin the day. It was nice to not have that fear.
That's funny. Batman ruins the day. Some people say saves the day, but all right, we'll go in that direction. You build yourself as a fan of the gangster movies, and obviously when you're referencing BBC Gangs of London, it's clear you will scour the earth for gangsterism. Rad, this is the story of how the Penguin becomes the biggest gangster in Gotham City. It's also a story about his very complicated relationship with his mother. Now, I had a hernia this summer. The instructions were watch TV, do nothing. And what I started doing was rewatching The Sopranos, which is why I've made this comparison. It's a story of Tony Soprano. So how does that storyline draw you in here?
I mean, look, first off, I just want to say, like, I mean, Roxana's like expression of gangster pastiche is very much applicable here because I think, yes, this is a show that is very much mimicking Sopranos on the surface. I mean, all of that inspiration lives on the surface of the show. Sopranos obviously did it better, but I think it is very interesting the way the Penguin deals with it because, yeah, this is the story about him dealing or trying to live up to the expectations of this really overbearing mother, and that's just part of this portrait that we get of the Penguin, where he's a guy with like these severe self-esteem issues, right? And it's
Mm.
like it becomes like because the self-esteem issues has to deal with the overbearing mother, but also the way he's cast aside from society because he has this bum leg and he's got like all the scar tissue and the way he looks basically. And so like you see that manifest in his rage. You see that manifest in the way he wants to control things, the way he wants to make himself bigger than he really is. It's like, and you see kind of the vulnerability in his performances in the way he tries to express all that. And it gets really interesting because like, if this character is ever interesting, it's fun to see his kind of self-satisfaction in his own performance, in the way he's performing being bigger than he is. And when he's just like, oh man, I pulled that off. It's like you still see that angry little kid inside trying to prove himself.
Right, multi levels of acting there. And Roxana, let's talk about that. Let's talk about Colin Farrell. As I said, unrecognizable, spending 3 hours every day in a chair with the prosthetics. And the only reason we knew it was Colin Farrell going in is because at the end of the movie, Red, as you said, at the end of the last Batman, a bunch of people were like, who was that? Who was that? And we went scrambling to IMDb to figure it out. Otherwise, you cannot really figure out, it's really not him, and clearly not an easy character to inhabit. So let's have a listen to this.
It was good. It was intense. It was, it's a dark world and dark character. So it was, by the end of it, I was good. I felt like I had me fill.
I felt like I had me fill. That's Colin Farrell describing what it was like to get into character, to play the Penguin. Tell me what you thought about his performance, Roxana.
Well, to build on what Rad said in terms of like, this is a show that knows and acknowledges that it's mimicking other gangster properties. I think what's so impressive about Farrell's performance is he plays a guy who knows that he is mimicking other gangsters, right? So like on the surface level of the performance, it's Colin Farrell, just as you said, like completely unrecognizable. You would not know it's him because he is wearing prosthetics, he is in a bodysuit. But what he does with his face and his expressions and his eyes, like he really lets you in to the internal world of this guy who is so desperate to like make a name for himself. And that allows the show to touch on like class issues, labor issues, like all the American dream stuff that any gangster story is really about. But it does also let the character like play with being the wise guy, the cool guy, mimicking the like gangster who grew up in his neighborhood, like all of these different levels of artifice and performance that I think Farrell really nails here and makes the character more than just sort of like a cartoonish caricature of the Penguin that we might remember from like Danny DeVito's performance. If you grew up with the animated series, what that character was, it gives it like a harder edge and like a more self-aware edge that I think only somebody like Farrell could pull off.
Rad, not to pit you and Roxana against each other, but his performance didn't fully work for you. Is that right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's like it couldn't sustain the length of the show for me, and I don't know if that's because of the material. There's a bit of a redundancy to the performance and stuff. Like, look, I mean, those moments we talk about where there's the layers of the performance I was into. I really loved his tete-a-tetes with Sofia Falcone because like between them, there's a real warmth and vulnerability that I really attached myself to in the show that made this show even better than that really seriously oppressive movie that came before. But in terms of his performance, yeah, like I mean, I do feel like he is somewhat inhibited by the latex and by this overworked accent, where I really felt like at a certain point I felt like there was I could feel the work, I could feel the labor, I could feel like him trying to get this character across all of that stuff, and maybe that's part of the performance. Maybe that works into that is part of like this guy's really trying to put on a show, and you feel the exhaustion of it. But for me, I mean, I came out of that pretty tired.
Tell me about this. You had the chance to interview Kristen Milotti. She plays Sofia Falcone, and your thoughts are that her performance is even better than Colin Farrell's. What was so impressive about that performance?
I mean, yeah, she just steals this movie. I mean, I feel like this is her movie. And the thing is, like, I mean, Kristen Milotti, like, most people I think know her as the mother from How I Met Your Mother. And I feel like she is just this unsung performer who is incredible, like this theater kid who is like Anne Hathaway levels of great, who could really sink her teeth into this performance. And what she does here is so incredible because it's this balancing act of precision and flamboyance. Like she's really kind of like putting on the theatricality that belong, like like the sensational fabulousness that a Gotham villain should have, while also being like like intricate. So it's like I was hanging on to her every head tilt. I was hanging on to her over pronunciation of words like rehabilitation, and like I was hanging on to just like like all facets of what she does, like the theatricality, the looks and stuff. And so for me, this series dragged whenever it kind of strayed from her orbit.
I'm so happy you called it a movie incorrectly, because I keep doing that because that's what it felt like. And I only watched.
That's where it belongs.
I got the the HBO, the screener, so I was able to watch 20 minutes of it, and I just felt like, oh, this film, I can't wait to finish this film. But of course, yeah, series. Now, Roxana, we mentioned that the show debuts tonight. It'll end up in HBO's what they called a prestige Sunday night slot, which has not been as prestigious. Like things have been tempered in that slot. But given that it is that slot, does that amp up expectations for the show? And do you think it delivers?
It definitely amps up expectations, but I also think it's been sort of an up and down year for HBO, right? Like House of the Dragon second season, I found more entertaining than the first, but I think it didn't necessarily hit as hard. The Regime and The Sympathizer earlier this year similarly felt like there was a muted reception to that. So I think The Penguin is very hyped, right? You have Colin Farrell, this movie star who is starring in it. You're returning to like this very well-received world of Matt Reeves' first film. So I do think expectations are pretty high. I think comparing it with The Sopranos does it a disservice because it is still an IP project, right? Like it is still constrained by the limitations of a prequel. But at the same time, like this is going to be HBO's Brave New World, right? They're doing more IP. They're doing a Harry Potter show. They're going more into this world. The City of God sequel series is also airing right now, right? So like they're really trying to grasp onto this space. And I do think The Penguin is better than I expected and will be entertaining for some people, but it also is a question mark for what the future of HBO will be.
Are people who are not fans of Batman watching this show?
I think that they could, because I don't think that you need a ton of Gotham intel to get drawn into like what is essentially a familial and crime drama. Right. So I would say yes, it plays.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot to you both. Simponpillai, I apologize for making you call it a movie. I feel like I telegraphed that multiple times.
I'm going to hold you to that.
Yeah. Rad is a film critic with CBC and CTV. You can find his interview with Kristen Milotti that we mentioned in the Globe and Mail. Roxana Hadidi, I apologize for too many comparisons to The Sopranos. It was just too top of mind. It was fresh. Mm-hmm. You are a TV critic at Vulture. Nice to talk to you both.
Hustlers you meet in the game. This colon, put your trust in them. Let me explain. The greedy killer. He wanna get the money.
That is Saturday Night Special. LL Cool J featuring Rick Ross and Fat Joe. It is from LL Cool J's latest album. Those are words I didn't think I was going to be saying in 2014. It's called The Force. It's his first new music in 11 years. You also might have seen clips from his recent VMAs performance, where he played a medley of some of his legendary hits, which got a lot of love online. Reminds people how much of LL is part of their sort of hip-hop, mental discography. To talk about LL Cool J, getting back into the studio, Mama said bring her out. A.Harmony is here. Hi, A.Harmony.
Hello.
I love all that LL. I'm all LL. There's so much as you go back and be like, oh my God, I know like 12 songs By heart. That's a big, I mean, my brain is mush at this point. Like by heart, I know 12 songs. It's been, as I said, 11 years since we've gotten new music from LL. He's been doing other things, namely acting. He was in over 300 episodes of just NCIS Los Angeles, and lots of films as well. It is possible that this will age me, and maybe you. That it's possible that some people know him as an actor and not even as a rapper. Where do you see him fitting into the scene in 2024?
It's actually so funny because a younger friend of mine saw that VMAs performance that happened the other day and said, "Oh, the guy from NCIS used to make music."
Oh God, it hurts.
Yeah,
It hurts
LL
to
Cool
hear
J is definitely at the point in his career where he's known for different things depending on your entry point. Like he's a rapper, he's an actor, he hosted lip sync battles. So I'd say he's definitely in his renaissance era in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, to his credit, he also talks about how many years of work he put into acting. He went in, acting courses, acting school. So that's probably a compliment to him that there are people who only know him as an actor. Tell me about you personally. What was your connection to LL Cool J when you were growing up?
Yeah, so I actually came into LL's career kind of right in the middle of his transition from rapper to actor. Like that's how I know him from the mid 90s, where he was still making music, but then also starting to pivot into acting. He had a sitcom called In the House. He was doing fashion design with FUBU. He did a Coca-Cola commercial and a Gap commercial. So I knew LL Cool J more as a brand. Music was one of the things that he did, but that wasn't the only thing that I knew him for.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you don't know about his rap battling. You don't know about his party music. And then I Need Love. He went to like a rap ballad that I was like, rappers have ballads? This is, but we did, we're talking about LL for a very important reason. He is really, you were not around for it as you brag about your youth, A.Harmony, but he is definitely one of the pioneers who brought hip hop to the mainstream. You can't talk about these OGs without talking about LL Cool J. He also popularized the term the GOAT, the greatest of all time. Tell me what makes him a hip hop legend for those who might not know.
Yeah. So as you said, LL Cool J was one of the first rappers to kind of bring hip hop to the mainstream. He was one of Def Jam's first signees, and he really helped that label go from like this dorm room project that two students had put together to a juggernaut in hip hop. He's had 14 studio albums, which is no small feat in itself. And then, of course, we've mentioned like the acting and the rapping and the fashion design and all of the different pivots he's made in his career. So definitely a legend, definitely a pioneer in the game.
Yeah, and you say, New York, dorm students. One of the students he met, Rick Rubin, NYU.
Yeah.
I think he was a little younger, LL Cool J, but it was Rick Rubin, like age 19 or 20, who he met and connected with, legendary producer. So you came into LL Cool J later in his career. You have people saying to you, but do you have them saying to you that you don't know the real LL? I suggest that. I feel like I said that to you already. Does that happen?
I definitely do. Like I said, I came into LL's career like in the middle of it. So he was already like a pioneer in hip hop. He'd already come out with, I think, 6 albums by the time I knew him. And I didn't know any of the music that he came out with before. I knew the Mr. Smith album, which came out in the mid 90s, and that had Loungin' and Hey Lover. So that's the LL Cool J I know. And like I said, I also knew him as an actor and somebody in fashion design, etc. So I didn't realize that he'd had this storied career before and that he'd actually helped to put Def Jam on the map. Like I knew none of that. And I remember in the late 90s, he received this Lifetime Achievement Award. And I just didn't get it. I was like, I don't understand why, they're honoring him with this prestigious honor. And older LL Cool J fans bit my head off. They were like, you have no idea. Like, this softened version of LL. You have no idea what he did before. I had no idea the impact that he made until I made that statement and was corrected by some of my fellow hip hop fans.
I offer my thanks to those fans who bit your head off. Despite their aggressivity, they did you a service, I'm sure. So let's talk about The Force. Let's talk about this new album. What do you think of it?
Yeah. The Force is good. It's not one of my favorite LL Cool J albums by any means. I think Mr. Smith holds a special place in my heart because that was the first one that I knew of his. But I do admire that he's pushing himself creatively. You definitely hear that on this album. There are some tracks like Saturday Night Special that you open the segment with that I love. I was playing that on repeat all summer, and I didn't realize that was an LL Cool J song at first because it just sounds like such a departure from other music that he's made. There are other songs on there like Black Code Suite, Passion is really good as well. They both give me these like East Coast New York vibes, which I really love. That's the hip hop that I fell in love with. So,
Same.
not my favorite album, but there are some good songs on there. And I think overall, I really admire that he just pushed himself creatively. That I always listen for that in every album that I hear, listen to from any artist. So he definitely hit that mark for sure.
Sure. And as you talk about New York, Q-Tip from Tribe Called Quest, also a big, pioneer of that New York scene, is the producer of this album. Do you feel that?
Yeah.
Is that something after listening to a few songs you would have been like, oh, I sense that?
So I didn't quite know that Q-Tip was the producer at first. I knew Saturday Night Special that he's on it because he lends vocals to it, but I think both LL and Q-Tip really pushed themselves creatively on this. Like they both really innovated their sound. LL actually made a statement when he was recording this album saying that he had to teach himself how to rap again, and I can hear that. Q-Tip gave him such a broad canvas to kind of paint on, and you can hear that LL kind of evolved in his lyricism and evolved in his delivery. So I definitely got that from both of them. It sounded like they were pushing each other in the best possible way.
Let me end on this. We haven't really mentioned this. We've talked about Pioneer and OG. He's 56 years old.
Yeah.
What does it mean to have somebody like him still making music?
Yeah, so hip hop itself is still a relatively young genre. LL's 56 and hip hop is about 51 now. So we've never really seen the genre age before. It's still a relatively young genre that's going through this aging process for the first time. And it's really beautiful to see LL Cool J and his peers kind of reinvent themselves. It's so beautiful to see him still in the studio making music, especially because a lot of the artists that I grew up with are gone and they died young. Notorious B.I.G., Big L, Big Pun, Tupac. Like there are so many artists who died before their time, died before we could see what they could do and what aging would look like for them. So I really think it's a luxury to hear LL still pushing himself in the studio, still releasing music at this age and kind of showing us what hip hop looks like as it evolves and artists kind of hit their second and third act. So it's a beautiful thing to witness.
I mean, for somebody who didn't think it was the best album, you certainly sung, a ton of praises about it and about him today. I'm a big fan, and there are bands and artists who you're like, oh, I don't like this phase of their, musical exploration. I've loved every phase that LL's been in, and I really like this too. Great chatting with you about it.
Yeah, you too, always.
Thanks, A.Harmony. A.Harmony is a music critic and an industry insider in Toronto, and we were talking about LL Cool J's new album, The Force. It is out now.